This discussion has continued for some time now, with multiple mass shootings occurring on a regular basis. These shootings have almost become a norm that our country has become numb to the death of innocent lives. And this town hall is just one more step towards providing a platform to discuss solutions with the youth getting more involved. I firmly believe that change is in the progress. And now I would like to hand the microphone over to Gianna to talk about our amazing guests.
Hello, my name is Gianna Molini and I'm a freshman at Lakeview Technology Academy in Pleasant Prairie. I've been exposed to local politics and social justice issues ever since I can remember. I fought against the KUSD dress code and I continue to strive for progress wherever it is needed in the community. I'm happy to say that we've brought together a diverse range of voices today. These speakers are mostly KUSD high school students. We had invited Paul Ryan and Randy Bryce. Unfortunately, Paul Ryan never responded to our numerous invites and Randy Bryce only recently declined. Thankfully, Kathy Myers accepted our invitation to join in the conversation about gun violence within our schools. All we ask is that for you to be quiet and respectful when each person is speaking. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Melina Bui and I'm currently a senior at Indian Trail. I'm an aspiring doctor, stereotypical I know, but I mean, it's not because of my parents, I genuinely want to become a doctor, and I will be attending UW-Madison in the fall. Politics has always piqued my interest and I'm all for social change. That's why I'm here, you know? I'm honored to be standing here today, organizing this event with Alicia and Gianna, and it's amazing seeing you all at this town hall as well. First things first, bathrooms are right out these doors behind the stairs, so if you need to go, feel free. We also offer voter registration for you youngsters out front, thanks to one of our lovely sponsors, Ford Kenosha. It's a table right when you walk out this door right over here. There's also a donation box outside to help cover the venue costs, and anything will be of great help. Now, the event will go as follows. Participants will be able to ask questions during the allotted time, and each question will be no longer than 1 minute. It will be timed. The responses, anyone at the table, are unlimited. Those who are asking questions, please line up at the 2 microphones you see on the floor over here. There will be 2 at each microphone. And once you have finished asking your question and hearing the answer, please return to your seat. The organizers, so myself, will be moderating the questions, and please be respectful of the time you're allotted for your question. I will be timing it. And if you have any experience you would like to share, please feel free to step up to the microphone, and you can have as much time as you'd like to speak of your experience. So our first speaker, we actually have a few guest speakers for the event today. Our first speaker will be Sarah Pearson, who is the state co-chair of the Women's March of Wisconsin. So please welcome Sarah Pearson.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to see so many people here today, and I'm thrilled that this is a student-organized event and that we have an educator here to talk about this, because I think that this is the perfect venue. I love going to events like this and participating in events like this, because I think that being in a place of education and being with educators and students is a good way to sort of stimulate a really in-depth conversation about gun violence. Gun violence is actually one of the reasons I got involved in Women's March. Like maybe some of you, I attended the 2017 Women's March in January, the big one, after Trump was elected, and I didn't actually get involved in Women's March until later in 2017 when I had the opportunity to do a protest at the NRA. And we marched 20 miles from the NRA to the Department of Justice. And the reason we did that is because Philando Castile, a black man, was shot and killed by a cop, and he was a licensed gun owner. And the NRA refused to make a statement about his death. And that's the thing. I think gun violence, it's important that we recognize that it affects us all in different ways, but we all need to be a part of the solution. And in the United States, it's unfortunate that it doesn't even take, as you've seen in the last week, Philando Castile was a licensed gun owner and he was carrying a gun. You don't even have to carry a gun in the United States. Stephon Clark had a cell phone. Sahid Vassell had a shower head. So I think that this is an important topic that needs to be addressed in our conversations about gun violence. And a lot of people ask me as Women's March, like, why is this something that you're talking about? Like, why is gun violence a women's issue? And one of the phrases that we always say is, no one is safe unless everyone is safe. So as a community, we need to have conversations that address all aspects of gun violence in order for us to move forward. I was doing a little reading about some gun violence statistics, and I found some shocking facts that in the United States, women are 11 times more likely to be killed by a gun than in similar countries. And that in cases of domestic violence, when the perpetrator has access to a gun, the risk percentage for a woman to be killed by that gun goes up by 500%. So I think that it's unfortunate that in the United States, the CDC has actually been banned from doing research into gun violence as a public health issue. Why is that? Like, why have we not changed that? So I think that's an important topic that we should address as well. And this is personal for me because one of my closest friends in middle school and high school was actually killed by a gun 3 years ago. And it makes me sad. I'm 28 years old, and we should be getting ready to celebrate our 10-year reunion, and she won't be there for it. So I'm thrilled to be in this place with these students who've taken it upon themselves to organize around this issue, and I'm very excited to hear all of your questions, and thank you again for hosting us.
Next up to speak is Victoria Shantz. She is a senior at Indian Trail.
In the United States, we make up 5% of the total population, and we own nearly half of all the 650 million civilian-owned guns worldwide, and we hold 31% of the global mass shootings in the entire world. 1 in 315 actual Americans will die account of guns, and that's not even taking into account of gender and race. It's not just these mass casualties that gun control will prevent, but rather save hundreds of thousands of individual lives. When you speak of gun control, you have to also take in of race and gender, because your chances of being a minority, it increases your chance by a lot of dying due to guns. African American men are 13 times more likely to be shot and killed by guns than white men. They make up 14% of the United States total population, and they are victims to more than half of all gun homicides. Black children they have 10 times the rate of white children to die to a gun-related homicide within their communities. They also have a 2.5% higher chance of being shot and killed by police officers, just relating to race and nothing else. More than 67% of Hispanic murder victims are killed by guns, and 28% of Hispanic suicides are committed by guns. Homicide is the second leading cause of death for Hispanics between the ages of 15 to 24. For whites, that's the fourth leading cause. For African Americans, that's the leading cause of death. With women, it's going to kind of relate back, but yeah, with domestic abuse victims, it increases your chance by 500% with just having one gun in the house. With just a simple argument, it can lead to just yelling to murder in a split second. That's all it takes. And it is that American women are 11 times more likely than other high-income countries to die due to guns. Just one single gun in a home can make the likelihood of homicide 3 times higher, suicide 3 to 5 times higher, and accidental death 4 times higher. Every time a gun in a home injures or kills a person, there are 11 completed and attempted gun suicides, 7 criminal assaults, homicides with a gun, and 4 unintentional shootings, deaths, or injuries. Gun control within our country is not just going to prevent mass shootings, but it's also going to save hundreds of thousands of lives just by itself. It will save communities who are constantly surrounded by gun violence and minorities that have fallen victims to guns both physically and emotionally. The conversation between our communities and guns needs to be a more consistent topic. We need to start talking more about how all the minorities in our communities are affected every single day by guns, and start preventing these mass casualties happening in our local towns and cities. because 83 deaths a day due to guns last year is completely unacceptable, and we have to stop it from happening again. This year we have had 3,768 deaths in our country due to guns. There's been a total of 96 days in the year, and we have already had 39 deaths a day. It isn't even half the year yet, and we are nearly halfway there from where we were last year. This epidemic needs to be stopped, and we need to make sure we are trying to prevent this from happening again. And then our next student speaker is Vincent Mesrine, a freshman at Indian Trail.
This controversy on gun control has split our nation into two, yet it should be a unifying issue. Yearly, we have 11,000 people die from the very guns many Americans buy and cherish. Yet we have had no legislation even hinting at a sign for gun control, even though 2/3 of Americans support such legislation. In charts, we see that charts claim 68% of all gun-related homicide, and there is still no action. In the United States, 270 million people own guns, far outnumbering any other in the world. We have these large numbers owning guns, and we don't even make sure that they can use it properly. People on terror watch list can buy guns. If you go to a gun convention or order online, you can order a gun without background checks. So how do we stop these people who get guns, you may ask? Well, this answer is in front of us. The answer is in front of us. Enforce stricter gun laws, nationalize gun sales, increase waiting times, increase the age requirements to own a gun, legalize semi-automatic rifles. There are countless solutions. People just choose not to face facts nor the solutions. Instead, we face countless excuses and delays. It's too soon to discuss this. If it's too soon, then when? People have said that exact quote over and over again, and 1 or 2 months later, we get another headline. 11 people dead. People have said, so will we stick ourselves in a giant loop until countless others die? People say that it's the mentally ill's fault. In an article in the New York Times, studies have shown that 235 mass killings analyzed, only 22% of them involve someone with mental illness. So then, what do? Well, Republicans are clear. The only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun. That is too black and white. 2/5 of attacks are actually stopped by a victim of the attack, and most of them are unarmed. Overall, there's a 3% chance of someone being in the vicinity of an attack that has a gun. And what's to say that those good guys make mistakes? They aren't the police, special forces, or military either. It's one mistake to end up with a report on the news stating 11 more people died in a mass shooting, which leads us to the most saddening thing of all. How accustomed we have become to these shootings. How we are starting to view the thousands dying as a number and not people. I alone couldn't help but wonder, when writing 11,000 people die yearly from guns, were they children? Did they have a family? And even when asking these questions, little is done to prevent more children from dying, and more parents who need to care for the family from dying. Many Americans would rather value the gun as a symbol of freedom than a symbol of death, of murder. But in the end, everyone must face the facts. Guns were made for one thing, to kill.
Amazing job, Vincent. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers, and now I would like to introduce Kathy Myers to the stage.
think I'll stand for a while here. I just want to thank you three for putting this together. Alicia, Melina, Gianna. I just want to thank you so much. I also want to thank their partners in this. Our Wisconsin Revolution, the Kenosha Dems, right? Forward Kenosha, I think, had a hand in this as well. So I just want to say thank you, for all that you've done to bring this issue forward and to keep the conversation going about it. I'm a high school English teacher. I'm also on the Janesville School Board, and I am running for Congress against Paul Ryan. Let me just start by saying that I really hate the circumstances that have forced us to come together to talk about this issue. And I'm not just talking about the massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. I'm also talking about the fact that you invited your representative, your elected representative, Paul Ryan, to come and talk with you about this incredibly important issue. And he is not here. I am very honored to be here in his place, but really, he should be here talking with you about this topic. I think it's incredibly important. And, the massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas has re-energized this national discussion about guns. And it's an incredibly important discussion. And I think that we're beginning to see some change. Even Republicans, many Republicans, are now talking about the need for gun control reform and legislation to deal with this problem. And it's not just a school problem. And I want to thank you, by the way, for broadening this discussion, ladies, because our kids are not only being killed at school, but they're killed on the way to and from school. They are oftentimes hit by errant bullets. Sometimes it's the result of gang violence. Sometimes it's the result of police killings. And I know that Mrs. Shannon had at one point thought she might be able to be here. I'm sorry she wasn't able to make it. I think that we all grieve with her in the loss of her son, Dante Shannon. And I think that as a mother, I have 2 children. One is 28 and the other is 27, and I can only imagine what she's going through. But this issue of police killings is really an important issue as well. There are about 1,000 people killed every year in police killings, shootings, about 3 per day. Dante was killed running away from the police. Dontre Hamilton was killed as he was lying on a park bench. And Stephon Clark, as was mentioned before, was killed talking on the phone in his grandmother's backyard. And I know that for the police that caused these deaths, it was probably considered a mistake. But we need to do something about these mistakes. These mistakes cannot be allowed to continue. I also believe that a lot of people that go into police work are very good people. I think that they start with the full intention of protecting people, of serving their communities. And I think that is always important to recognize. But I'm wondering if, the power of a gun, that when you are licensed and issued one as a police officer, coupled with the incredible stress of the job and always the potential for danger, isn't a terrible combination. And I think that there are some things that we can be doing. We could be putting body cameras on police. I think that would encourage and increase accountability by the police to our community members. I think that police need more training in de-escalation tactics. And I also believe that they probably need more training in learning how to deal with people with mental health issues. I think that we need to prioritize non-lethal approaches to policing, especially in cases where a suspect or someone that they're interested in talking to is running away or is unarmed. I think it's incredibly important. So you mentioned that, and I've mentioned too, that I'm a teacher. And so I can really relate to the concerns that these students have and your concerns as well. I have been teaching high school English for 24 years. And I have been through Columbine, Sandy Hook, and now Parkland, and of course all the others in between as well. And let me tell you a quick story. Just a few days after the Sandy Hook massacre, at my school, we had a lockdown because there was a threat of a shooter on the roof and other shooters in the hall. Now it turned out that it was a hoax called in from, actually, I think the call actually came from someplace like I think it came from Colorado, not even anybody within our community. But we went on lockdown for well over an hour while we sorted it out. Kids were cowering in, sheltering in place, and cowering in a corner of the classroom, crying. 5 days after the Parkland massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, I was teaching. It was 8th hour. It was just shy of 3 o'clock. We were going to dismiss for the day at 3:15. And I'm talking with my students about, I think, logical fallacies now I think about it. Yes, that was the lesson of the day. And I was talking with them, and all of a sudden the fire alarm went off. So you can probably imagine what my reaction was. This is just a few days after Parkland. Well, I waited. Now, if a fire alarm goes off, I'm supposed to evacuate students. That's my job. My job is to keep them safe. But I waited. I waited until I heard noise in the hall that sounded like people evacuating. And at that time, I just told my kids to leave, told them where to go. And even then, I still wasn't sure that I wasn't setting my kids up to be killed. Even as we walked, and by the way, finding out that the fire alarm was a false alarm took an incredible long time. Even as we walked to our rendezvous spot, in the open, I still wasn't sure whether or not my kids were going to be safe. And it turns out it was the fire alarm was the result of maintenance work going on. It was set off accidentally. But the thing is that evacuation and saving my kids from a fire was not my first thought. My first thought was whether or not my students were going to be targets. And I think that's wrong. I think that's a real problem. I've been through 24 years of fire drills, 24 years of tornado drills, and now I go through active shooter drills with my students, which means that we talk with them about the procedures. We talk with them about when we should shelter in place, what we should throw at an assailant, how do we know when to evacuate, what's in my room that I can use to barricade my door with. Do I have any windows? Yes, I'm a lucky teacher. I have windows in my room. This cannot be our new normal. I refuse to let this be our new normal, where I'm having those kind of conversations with my kids. I really believe that we need universal background checks to stem this tide of violence against our kids and in our communities. I know that's going to be hard to get, especially with the current leadership. Because in order for that to happen, Paul Ryan has to be willing to call a vote on universal background checks. And I think we know that that's just not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because Paul Ryan accepts the most money from the gun lobby than any representative, past or present. So he is not representing these kids on this issue. He's representing people with very deep pockets and who profit by the exorbitant number of guns being sold in this country. So yes, I believe we need universal background checks. I also think that we need to ban military-style assault weapons. We need to ban or limit the size of magazines. We need to raise the age to where you can own a gun to 21. And as a woman, I was very thankful to hear the statistics that other people brought up, the statistics about the number of women who are killed with a gun. Because I also believe that we need to close those loopholes that permit the perpetrators of domestic violence to get a weapon. And you know, these are issues and solutions that the vast majority of people in this country agree on. And yet we still can't get a vote on it. And so, of course, that should tell you, you know, who Paul Ryan is serving. When he won't even listen to the people, when the people are calling for change, and he won't do it. But I know that people in my community and people in this district and actually people nationwide want to see something done to reduce the availability of these kinds of weapons that are causing mass murder in our communities and are traumatizing our kids and our families. So thank you very much for listening to me, David. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you. And I've given you my priorities, and you know, and I would always love to answer questions at an appropriate time. I'm not sure when that is about these issues. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. So, like before, I explained the procedure for questions. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to line up at these two microphones. There will be two at a time so that there's not too much chaos happening. And they will be timed if you're having a question. A question will be 1 minute each. And I will be there to keep time and keep track of it, and I'll tell you when to stop. And if you have any experiences, please feel free to come up. We would love to hear them. Okay. We may begin.
I live in Kenosha. Okay. I just have one impediment to future changes with the gun law is I called Paul Ryan's office 4 times in the last month and wanted to check to see how much money he'd received from the NRA. I asked if he received $177,000, which it says on the internet. I didn't receive a call back. A reason to have a ban on assault rifles that I haven't heard from anybody is that one of the children from the school in Parkland had 9 bullet holes in her. That for me is reason enough. And the one question I have is, I see Indian Trail here, and I forget what the other school was, but nobody from Bradford or Trimper. Are people in the schools, the staff, supporting the children relative to this? We went to Indian Trail the day that they had the walkout, could not go on the property, and an administrator from the school was traveling around and asked us, what are you people doing here? What do you want? So I mean, they were just trying to scare us off, so I didn't see much support from Indian Trail staff supporting the students.
Thank you. I was one of the organizers for the Indian Trail walkout, so thank you for trying to come and support us. As for support, our administrators didn't really give us a yes or no answer of if we could do it, nor did they support us. I know with other schools, I know Bradford and Tremper also had walkouts, but administration didn't take a firm stand on it either. And I know they had informed me and Molino, we had organized it at Indian Trail, that nobody would be allowed on the premises. No news stations or anything. It was kind of upsetting because the students, we had about 300 students from Indian Trail walkout, and we were trying to make a statement, and then they stopped, media and other participants in our community from coming and making that statement with us, which was very upsetting. But we would like more support from our schools because the students are asking for help, and they're asking for you to support us and trying to protect us.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you for being here. My name is Tom Gilding from Burlington, Wisconsin. And I just wanted to ask you, let's say Randy Bryce ever agrees to debate you and says, I'm a working man, I have national name recognition, I have what it takes to be in the national spotlight, I have financial support to go up against Paul Ryan. What do you have that will be strong enough to beat the leader of the House Republican who has annihilated Democratic opponents for a long time? And when you get to Washington,
I like that.
what committee or committees would you be on?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. You are absolutely right that the money that Paul Ryan has is ungodly. And I am sure that he will use quite a bit of it. I guess how much he uses is indicative of how worried he might be. But I really believe in the power of people. I have been a grassroots organizer, community organizer for a very long time. I was my union president and vice president. And I was also in charge of the strike center at my school when we went on strike in 2003. I know how to mobilize, and I think that that's going to be how we beat Paul Ryan. So we're raising a lot of money as well. We will not raise as much as Paul Ryan. I really doubt that. Not that I wouldn't like that, but I really doubt that. But I don't think you're going to beat Paul Ryan by running Paul Ryan's race. I think you beat Paul Ryan by showing that you really believe in service. And that means that you go and you knock on people's doors and you talk to them about what your vision is, how you want to help, and how you think you can improve their lives. And I believe that's how we're going to beat Paul Ryan.
And your strengths then in Washington Committee's education and environment?
Yes. So there are certain things that are incredibly important issues to me. Education is incredibly important to me. I would love to be there, and I know that it's going to be difficult, but I really think I should be there to play defense against Betsy DeVos.
Yeah.
Woo! Environment, yes, very much. And dealing with environmental issues is incredibly important to me too.
Bring the EPA back!
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Grant.
Hi, my name is Andy Gronick. I'm running for governor.
Yeah.
I have more of a comment than a question, and that is, I am so proud of you guys for leading the walkout, for having the courage to be here today, for standing up and expressing your views so eloquently. Unbeknownst to me, I also have an 8th grader who led the walkout in his school and stood up and with courage said many of the same things that you're saying. So first, thank you. Now, secondly, as a person who's running for an elected office, who never imagined I would ever run for office, keep it up. Because the energy you're putting into it, you have to know what you want and ask for it clearly. Because there is so much at stake. There is a slaughter that's going on in our country. We don't need military weapons that are not only deadly, but they're deadly accurate. They were designed to be in military environments to kill people fast and efficiently. We don't need those in the state of Wisconsin. The common sense things that you're asking for, keep asking. But most importantly, the people who are elected, hold them accountable. You are going to be an incredibly powerful voting bloc. Yeah. Don't let the energy go away. If someone's accepting millions, like Scott Walker, $3.5 million from the NRA, then hold him accountable. Anybody that is putting special interests over the people of the state of Wisconsin, then keep this courage going. Understand that your vote does matter. Get out there and be specific about what you want, and if you don't get it, then get somebody else in office that's going to provide that for you, because that's what you deserve. And I'll say lastly, I had a very off-chance opportunity to actually run into some of the Parkland students on a connecting flight in Florida. So I met with students, parents, teachers, first responders, and I'll tell you this, the kind of fear that these kids experienced is unnatural. Unbelievable. Those faces that are on the screen behind you, thank you for running those, and it's unimaginable that every one of those kids met their death that way. To the point of teachers, one of the parents was also a teacher, taught for 16 years in math. The teachers in this particular case are only getting 10 visits for counseling with a copay, and then after that, they're on their own. They're on their own. And I talked to her son first, and he said, my mom's suffering from PTSD. And then I went back to talk to her, and she said, what am I going to do? Two of the sisters that ran from that school when they got the code red, found each other on the way home, trying to get a hold of their mom, who was frantically trying to get to the school to figure out what happened to her kids. The first responder said to me, I've been doing this for 25 years. I won't tell you what I saw, but I've never seen anything like it. They're covering up bullet holes to try to provide the impression that it didn't happen. The kids now feel like they're in prison. And one of the young ladies said to me, you know what? I don't want to go in that building anymore. I just want to go away. But I'm afraid. Where am I going to go? No matter where I go, I'm afraid. This has to stop. And the courage, the energy, the enthusiasm, the acumen, everything that the students are putting into this is teaching everybody like me a lesson of what it is to be involved, to be active, to be committed. Keep it up, and when I'm elected, because I'm going to beat Scott Walker, hold me accountable. Thank you.
If I could respond to that real quickly as well. Great, thank you very much. Wonderful comments and so poignant. I went to the march in Washington, and the night before the march, I was invited to a reception for kids that were coming into March. And one of the children, she's not a child anymore, she's in college now. She brought her friends from the University of Alabama up to DC. She was a Parkland grad. And Stoneman Douglas grad, and her parents were there, and she is the older sister of one of the students that was in the school that day. And I talked a lot with her. She's holding up okay. But I also spoke with the parents, and I could not get over just how poised and gracious they were, and how committed they are also to making this kind of change. But one thing that stuck with me most is that the father of this student and of one of the students that was in the building that day remarked about how our generation has let down this generation by not doing something about it.
Hi, I'm the chair of the Kenosha County Democratic Party. And I'm not here to put a plug in, but I will. It's a sad thing that we have to be here discussing something like gun control on a Saturday morning, when there's many more issues we need to address. But I give you all a great hand. I have a granddaughter in Indian Trail. I believe you probably know her, Leah Kuster. And I know you can't get an education if you're sitting there watching the door constantly, thinking what's coming through that door next. But I do push that. There's a number of you who will be 18 by November, and you can register to vote. If you're going to be 18 by November, you can register now. I really hope you will, and talk to your peers about registering to vote. It's important. Some people think one voice doesn't matter, but you put 1,000 of those voices together, a lot of one people will make thousands and thousands of voters. The young people are who we are defending right now. You are the upcoming, you are the future. But now I also will say that you can join the Democratic Party. I hope you don't want to join the other side. At 14. And if you have a student group like the college Dems or the high school Dems, if that's the tough one we have, you can be on our board and you can have a voice. So I encourage you, the students is $10. I don't even want to say that, but we need people to build up the party, build up the organization, build up your neighbors and whoever you can talk to, because this is important. You would have thought this would have been done in Sandy Hook. 6-year-olds that didn't have a chance in life are now gone. That's where we should have started, actually before, but that was a sad day. But we need to encourage people to do away with assault weapons.
Hi, my name is Leslie Schlax, and I just want to say that this last year and a half, there's been lots to be worried and discouraged about and scared about. But the student movement has been a ray of sunshine and hope, and just don't give up. Thank you very much.
As a parent in the district, I wrestle with a lot of mixed feelings of fear of sending my child to school and what might happen. I have a question for the 3 student organizers, because I believe each of your schools have received threats, even if they turned out to be false alarms, that there were threats of gun violence happening in your schools. What is it like to be a student in a time like this and to go to school with that threat hanging over you?
It's ridiculous having to go to school and having to feel this anxiety of just these things that are happening all the time. And as a student at Lakeview, we recently had a bomb threat, and I was not there, and my friends were texting me, and they were just so scared, and I really can't just describe how much fear and that I had because my friends were in this situation.
Same with us at Indian Trail, we were threatened. There was over social media a gun threat that students were going to come in and shoot up Indian Trail, and our school was closed that day. But I remember feeling very, very frightened. I didn't think that it was possible, because once you see all these mass shootings on TV, you know, there's kind of that idea, whether you're students or parents, that this could never happen. This would never happen to me, this would never happen to my children, and this wouldn't happen in my community. But now we're experiencing it in our own town in Kenosha, and now the students here are experiencing that fear that, you know, we as a community had never thought we would. You know, we have been going through ALICE training in order to protect ourselves from these intruders, but just the training is frightening. You know, a couple months ago, we had gone through and they had played over the announcements, the actual recording that would play if we did have an intruder enter our building. And I was in choir, and there's about 60 students in that class. And even though we knew it was a drill and it wasn't an actual intruder, it just went silent. It was completely silent because all of us were so anxious. We had such high anxiety. And I remember my choir teacher, saying, I know it wasn't an actual procedure and it was a drill, but he asked us how we felt in that moment. And multiple students had said that was terrifying. Just hearing the recording was absolutely terrifying because you know that recording could play any moment when you're in that school and you have no idea what could happen.
And when it comes to these school shootings, I think a lot of us don't think it could ever happen to us, that it's not personal, but I mean, it's serious, I know that for sure. I've always known that, but it wasn't until the recent Maryland shooting. I know it wasn't intended for a mass shooting, the shooter had an intention, but it became personal when that happened because my own cousin, he's a little freshman, he was in that school. And to be worried and not be able to know if he was okay that day, oh my God, it was only like an hour or two that we had no contact, but that was insane because it became personal. It could have happened to me, it could have happened to my own family member. So that's just my experience. People always think that it's not gonna happen to them, but it's possible. And we've seen that today.
Good morning. My name is Joel Trudell. I'm a Kenosha resident. In light of our current federal leadership, national gun control or gun violence legislation is probably not going to happen. So I'm wondering what kind of powers do we have locally in Kenosha or statewide that we can kind of take some control back and not wait for folks like Paul Ryan to show up.
Thank you for your question. So there are probably some state laws, of course, that you could pass, but part of the problem is the leadership that we have in Wisconsin as well. And I think that Mr. Gronick mentioned how much Scott Walker gets from gun lobby folks like the NRA. And so I'm going to, I kind of hold on to this idea that I was raised on. Government, this is what my family taught me, my parents taught me. Government is not this other thing out there. It's us. It's us. And there have been a number of people have mentioned that these kids are going to be voting this year and that we are all, of course, can be voters. And I really think that if we hold on to that, then we can see some change. But that it's going to be very difficult to get change with the current leadership. We have to demand it. We have to show them that we will and express our opinion to them in many ways, but one of the ways we express that is in the voting booth. And we must always express ourselves in the voting booth. And remember that it's our government, it is us.
Hi, I'm Linda Engelson. I'm an educator at MATC downtown. I cannot believe, as a student to be trained or sit in on an active shooter experience in your classroom, just to know what to do for a drill. I recently sat in for CERT training, which is a crisis response training for emergencies. And I was the only instructor in that class for that particular day. And as I was taught by public safety, one-on-one, and as they were talking about the regular drill, which was a tornado, which is severe weather, fire, etc. But when it came to the active shooter part, it really took me on. I mean, I was like a wreck by the time I finished this. She's explaining, well, you exit here, and you have to take the students there, and, you know, this whole thing. And I just sat there thinking, as an instructor, because I'm at a very vulnerable area of the school, meaning is that we get outsiders coming in. We don't know who they are. There's no metal detectors. There's stickers on the windows, but that doesn't really apply, you know, because anybody could come in. We've had some situations there also. But what took me was I was the only instructor there, and I'm wondering, where's everybody? This is after the Parkland thing, you know. Like, where are these people? You know, and everyone has a schedule. Everyone's busy, et cetera, et cetera. You know, they all have excuses. So I'm trained, but I, as an educator, will not carry a weapon. I will not carry a weapon. And the reason why I say that is I've got to teach students. I can't worry about an active shooter. Why am I teaching? I'm teaching to educate. I'm not going to go around with a gun. I'd probably shoot myself. You know, I mean, it's just beyond my reasoning. I went to school. I never had this type of situation going on. You shouldn't. And so I'm really involved in this. I've tried to tell other faculty members about safety issues. It just goes one ear and out the other ear. I'm very vocal in my school. I don't think they're listening. They're listening, but not on the surface where they should really be listening. So I commend you. Keep doing what you have to do, because it's really important. We got to settle this. I don't want to be shot with one of those AR-15s. And, you know, every day I walk into that class, I'm figuring out how I'm going to protect my students. That's what I'm doing every single day. It's like my brain is not on class. It's like, okay, what do I do? Because we service clients too when they come into the school. So, yeah, I'm paranoid. I've got all the neuroses. But you shouldn't have it. You should not have it. You should be going to school and enjoying your classroom and embracing your really great teachers that are teaching you and enjoying your life. You're young. You know, I don't want to see you going to college and being afraid going to college. It's your time of life. So thank you for what you're doing, and keep doing it. You know, so I appreciate it.
If I may take a moment to add to what you're saying here, and I think that I feel you on this issue very much. You know, Paul Ryan suggested that maybe it might be a good idea to arm teachers, and it is and have school districts, you know, start implementing that. I'm really glad that I'm on the Janesville School Board, because I can stop that kind of nonsense before it ever at least happens in Janesville. And as a teacher myself, I didn't sign up for that. And you know, even the best shooter misses almost all the time. And I didn't sign up to take someone's life, whether they are a good person or a bad person, and I am very likely to hurt innocent people if I do that. And so that is a real concern. And you mentioned the training that you went through. We've talked about training as well. We also talked about the safety measures, you know, signing in and those sort of things. One of my biggest complaints is that all of the efforts to protect kids have been bestowed totally on schools and on teachers. And I don't have a problem with stepping up the security, with requiring people to sign in or whatever measures that you have to have in order to keep kids safe, in order to make sure that you know who's in the building. Those are very important things to do. But we have seen absolutely no action from leadership, people who are supposed to lead on this issue, namely Paul Ryan. but he's not alone. And so I am so tired of everybody looking at schools and at teachers to say, how are you going to fix the problem? Nobody and leadership of our elected officials is doing anything about it. They are not showing leadership. And I really think that has to change.
Yeah.
I would just like to add something about the arming teachers. I think it's also important that, we're talking about guns in our schools, but then the solution to this problem is by adding more guns to our schools. So we should be arming all of our teachers, and that will solve the issue. Like Kathy had said and how you had said, you guys are teachers and you're there to teach. You guys are not police officers, you're not retired Army officials, you are not trained. You are trained to teach your designated subject matter, not to arm yourself and to shoot an intruder that comes into your school. I think the idea is really ridiculous, and it's really not a solution.
Well, I know that it's probably not the right thing to do to go ahead and brag about your grade points, but I'm State Representative Todd Onstead, and I'm proud that I have an F rating with the NRA.
Yeah.
And candidate Groening is certainly right. We need a governor that doesn't take $3 million from the NRA. We also need a state legislature that is not in their pocket. And I got to say that there's nothing more important than registering to vote and getting out in November. I have to congratulate Kathy and Randy for stepping up to Paul Ryan. What a great task, and I think she deserves a big round of applause right now. And we should all feel really good about what happened last Tuesday night. We elected for the first time in 24 years a candidate, for the first time in 24 years, a candidate that is not incumbent to our state Supreme Court that will not be in the pocket of the NRA. So she deserves a big round of applause. And I just want to say one final thing to all the student leaders here today, and you are all indeed leaders, and I just think that there's no question that you will be part of the solution, and I know that we're going to get this done. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, hi, my name is Steve Anderson. I'm from Racine, and actually, okay. Yeah, it's hard to hold this. You hear me now? Yeah, I'm Steve Anderson. I'm from Racine, Wisconsin. I do a little subbing just as a quick aside before I speak about my experience at the march in D.C. Actually, at Case High School, I participated in the walkout, and I thought our administration did an excellent job in overseeing what was happening. Our directing principal, she came outside and gave a speech, and it's not that the administration took one side or the other, they didn't get into the politics of it, but overall, I was very pleased with the administration at Case High School as to how they handled that. And I promised to be very, very brief, but I wrote up a little draft this morning on my experience in D.C. 2 weeks ago at the March for Our Lives. A number of pundits in the media have taken jabs at the Never Again or the March for Our Lives moment as being controlled by, quote, liberal individuals and organizations on the left, unquote. I believe this to be a false, if not careless, mischaracterization. I attended the March for Our Lives event in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago today. What I observed was an interesting cross-section of American people. There were former military individuals who have served their country, such as myself. There were young children, teens, the middle-aged, as well as seniors. Females and males equally were present. Many races were there, including Asians, African Americans, Caucasians, and Hispanic Latinos. I spoke with numerous individuals from as far away as the state of Washington to the state of Connecticut. I spoke with a teenager, Nat Wheeler, whose 6-year-old younger brother, Ben, was one of the 20 children shot and killed at the Sandy Hook Elementary School in December of 2012. I saw and I listened to the inspiring teenage leaders from the Marjorie Stoneman High School in Parkland, Florida. These courageous teens made this historical day in our nation's capital a reality. And finally, I spoke with a young DC police officer and praised her for the marvelous job the DC police did in coordinating the day's events with the many, many thousands of people. The DC police officer told me that she would have joined with us if not for her being on duty. In conclusion, what I participated in and observed was not a, quote, liberal or leftist event, unquote, but simply American people at their finest. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Guerrero. I worked with vulnerable populations in Kenosha County for a very long time. I've worked in the education system as well, and so my question for you, or actually my comment for you, is that I'm hoping that you'll address the difference between gun control and violation of Second Amendment rights. I know that that's a big issue right now, and for people who don't understand the difference between a handgun and a semi-automatic rifle, or something that is considered more on that violent end, they're assuming that there's a no difference between the two, and there's a significant difference. And I'm hoping that you'll just address that for a minute so that the people who might think that this is a violation of Second Amendment rights really understand the difference and the significance.
Thank you for your question. Elizabeth?
Yes.
Elizabeth, thank you, Elizabeth. So, just yesterday there was a court in Massachusetts that upheld certain regulations regarding guns. And it has been done before. And so there are restrictions on amendments. You know, we have the freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom of hate speech. And so when I would speak with people about this, I'm talking about very common sense things. Like, if you're going to have a weapon, we should know who you are, whether you have felonies and have been violent in the past. And so there's nothing outrageous about this, and it has been done before. I think that the way that we should talk about it is in terms of the kinds of weapons that we're really focusing on, the ones that cause the most damage. And we also need to be respectful of the fact that there are a lot of people in this state and all over the country that are use guns for sport, to go hunt, and we're not talking about that kind of thing. We are not talking about banning handguns, but we do want to know who you are if you want to have one. And I don't think that's an outrageous request. And since we have about 30,000 people in this country a year killed by guns. And I know that a lot of people like to talk about your freedom to own a gun, and you do have the freedom to own a gun. But we also have other freedoms in this country, like the freedom to go to a movie without worrying about whether or not you're going to get through the credits, or go to school, or go to work, or go to church and walk down your street. And I think that the majority of people really understand that when we talk about common sense gun reform, we are not talking about taking away guns from people who hunt. I think they understand the kind of weapons we're talking about. The vast majority of people support some legislation and targeting certain kinds of weapons, and 90% support universal background checks, which is, again, not an unreasonable request.
Hi, I'm Aiden Hawkins. I'm a 6th grader at Bristol School. Soon after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting, we went through Alice training, and we learned how to make a barricade, how to, what to throw at an attacker. And I'm not gonna lie, I was scared. But I don't believe that I should have to be scared. And my school does have some safety precautions. Like every person that comes into the school, not teachers or students, they have to wear a name tag saying who they are and why they're there. They have to sign in and out if they're taking a child with them. But I don't think it's enough to stop a shooting. So, in the near future, what do you think our federal government is going to do about this?
Thank you very much for your question. So, I personally think that unless we see change next November, they will do nothing. Absolutely nothing. You know, it was mentioned before that we thought something would happen after Sandy Hook. And it seems like for the last, this generation right here has not ever known a time when when a school shooter wasn't a possible threat. I can remember a time when we could go to school and not worry about that. But they will not do anything. And so we saw the cycle, of a mass shooting or a shooting or whatever. And then, of course, the discussion about when is the time to talk about it. And we watched it fade. And then we had another massacre. And we go through the cycle again. I do feel, Mr. Hawkins, that we're going to see a change this time come November. I think that these kids, you are going to make that change by refusing to allow us to continue the cycle. I really believe that. I have a great amount of hope because I see what you're doing. I work with kids every day, and I am incredibly impressed by them, and so they make me very hopeful.
My name is Ben Abelson. I'm from Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, and it's about arming teachers. I strongly believe it's wrong to do that because the incidence of accidental shootings in the classroom, in the school, could be greatly increased, greatly. The teachers are there to teach, not to enforce and to kill intruders. There are others involved in that. And there could be accidental shootings of people. First of all, if the law enforcement comes in, if they see a teacher with a gun, one example would be that they may think that the teacher is an intruder. That's one thing. There's another issue here. There are a lot of politicians that think we should arm teachers. Well, there are thousands and thousands of schools in this country. Thousands of schools. I don't know the exact number of teachers, but I'll tell you one thing. By arming teachers, the NRA would love it because they're going to sell more guns. Thank you.
So, I have talked about gun control with a lot of freshmen at Indian Trail, and I can say that's unpleasant. A lot of what I've heard is that we need guns for self-defense, and that it's a part of our American culture. How do you feel about that?
I am a freshman at Lakeview, and I have had some conversations about gun control with my fellow freshmen also, and I would also say that it was very unpleasant. But I really just think that people don't know where to put blame on this. People don't know what to think of the trauma that's happening around them. And so they say, well, we need guns for self-defense because they don't know what to do. They don't know what to think. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Vincent. As for the comment saying guns is a part of our American culture, I think it's important to address that sometimes our American culture isn't the best. And as time has progressed, we've changed and we've gotten better. And I feel like what's happening now with guns and mass shootings is another case, and it's another stepping stone in our country's history. And I feel like this is going to be a real testament to what our country is going to do about it.
Yeah.
My name is Victoria, and one of the things that I try to do all the time is use my voice and the privilege that society gives me for minority disadvantages. And I guess, Kathleen, my question's more directed towards you. What would you do to help minorities gain more advantages in our society and our systems, and also with the gun violence more too? Because we've talked a lot about the schools, but the stuff that's happening more in our communities is huge. And I was just wondering if both of those are, what would you do?
Thank you for your question. So you bring up a very good point. Do you know that your highest cause of death, if you are between 1 and 44 years old and you are African American, is to die by gun violence? And so I really believe that the kind of ideas we are proposing here about background checks, about doing what we can to reduce the number of guns, the availability of guns, and certainly that of assault weapons, I think that will obviously benefit the minority communities very much. I also think there's many different legs to that stool, and I'm glad you brought up the economic situation. So I really believe that we need to do whatever we can to improve public education. I think that when you start to see a school falter in a community, the community starts to fall apart soon after. And we need really strong neighborhood schools. Really strong. And it shouldn't matter what your zip code is as to whether or not you have a great program with a lot of teachers who are very well trained. I think that that will definitely help out in the minority communities as well. The voucher programs that Betsy DeVos has proposed, I think last time I read she has set aside $20 billion for vouchers nationally. That will starve public education. And what it does, of course, it's a way of I think, of increasing segregation. And so that you are denying members of the minority community access to a quality public education because you're starving out the resources for their schools. Yep. I also believe that there are economic things that we could be doing in relation to schools. I want to see a lot of emphasis placed on career and college readiness. I would love to see a lot of apprentice programs between schools and businesses and trades. I think that we need to do things like make public college free, and at the 2 years level as well, and the 4-year for public universities, make that free. That gives more access to minority populations or disadvantaged populations. I also believe in a $15 minimum wage. I think that if you You have to be able to support yourself. And we all benefit, by the way, when everybody can support themselves. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Karen Hermanson. I live in Mount Pleasant. And first of all, I want to thank you, young people, for doing this. This generation is so impressive. It's amazing, all of you. And for several years, I worked as a volunteer as a special registration deputy, and along with other people. And we would go into communities that were underserved and try to get people to vote. We've been at Parkside. And I think the biggest problem has been voter apathy. We could not get people interested in giving their voice by voting. The excuses were, well, all politicians are all alike, they're all crooked. You know, I'm not interested in politics, I'm too busy. I voted last time and my candidate didn't win, so I'm not going to vote anymore. And I think it is appalling the number of people in this country who do not vote. So I am hoping that you keep up your optimism and your energy and don't give up, because you are not going to win at first, considering who is in charge right now. But registering people to vote, especially you young people, is extremely important. And I want to remind you that it is your generation who gets sent over to fight and bleed and die in whatever war that my generation sends you to, just like my husband got sent over to Vietnam by the previous generation. And one more thing, my husband is a 20-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and he does own guns, and I've gone with him to do target shooting, and he absolutely believes that these type of weapons do not belong in the hands of civilians, and we are both for very strict gun control. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Terry Jacobson. I'm the county treasurer here in Kenosha. So as you can imagine, statistics often grab my attention when I'm looking at them. Some of which you have all already gathered and talked about, and I'm very impressed with the research you've done so far. There's a few other ones I want you all to think about. One of them is the almost direct correlation between gun ownership and gun violence. For every 1% increase in gun ownership, you see a 0.9% increase in gun violence. So that's a startling statistic right there. It's almost a direct line correlation between the two. Another thing to think about is take a hard look at the state of Massachusetts, because they've done what I would say are some of the toughest gun laws in the state, and they pay dividends. One of the things that I like that they're doing, where you're talking about domestic violence and gun deaths due to domestic violence, they allow local law enforcement to deny a gun permit if you've had multiple domestic disturbance calls to your house, even if there's not a conviction. And that has reduced the amount of deaths in domestic violence in Massachusetts statistically significantly. And that's something we need to look at on top of the bump stocks, on top of all these other things, are those things that can really change people's lives. Not just mass shootings, these are people's lives every day. And finally, one of the most startling statistics I've seen recently was the idea that there's this idea that we just have more crime here and we have to live with it and it's a thing, right? Well, we don't. All the other developing nations of the world have about the same rate of actual crime as what we have, all right? They did a study between London and New York, almost exact amounts of the same types of crimes, burglary, theft, all those things, almost exactly the same between the two cities. But you're 54 times more likely to die in New York because of those crimes than you are in London. So that's a startling thing to think about. The same exact crime in one city versus another, and that crime is happening at the same rate, but you're 54 times more likely to die here than there. So I'm going to leave you with that, and have a nice day, and thank you guys for putting this together.
I apologize for speaking a second time, but I think this needs to be addressed. How many people go to Kenosha County Fair? Now that is for the youth, 4-H and all the other things. I want to say my wife started a petition because the Republican Party auctions off or raffles off a AR-15. There's a start. We need right there is, the petition is to petition the county fair officials not to have that booth there, or the booth could be there, but the gun being there, because that's soliciting high-powered machine guns or whatever. Anyway, the petition was on Facebook. I'm not sure where it's at now, but I wish I'd brought paper petitions here, because we need to petition that county fair to not have that gun there. It's a start. Anybody sees it on Facebook, it's probably on the Democratic webpage, in Facebook, my wife's Facebook, but share it, sign it, and I'm going to have her put some paper petitions up for different events with a trophy to have. Thank you.
I'm Sandy Lepisto, Mount Pleasant. I am a retired teacher and active substitute teacher, and I'm going to tell you that when recently I go into the schools, I've been telling the administrators that I need a key to the room. If they lock the door, then I'm locked in and I can't go to the bathroom. If the door is open, then I don't feel safe. And I hate the fact that when I go into a room, I look around to see where will we go, where will we hide. It's not a pleasant feeling. I'm an optimist, basically, and you young people have raised my optimism and are helping to keep it that way. What I wanted to say originally, if we end up needing to prioritize this gun issue, I think we have to start with these automatic weapons. If people use the Second Amendment as an excuse, I say, own as many muskets as you want. I was at Sandy Hook. I'll try to, every time they talk about it, I have a hard time. I was there a few days after. I have grandchildren in school in Connecticut, and son and daughter-in-law who teach. At first, I didn't know what school it had taken place at. And then I found out it wasn't where my family is. But I got to go and help a second grade teacher set up her classroom in an abandoned middle school when they were moving. They just took truckloads of their material out of Sandy Hook and went into this middle school. So I was there to help them set up their new classrooms and felt with them the sadness and despair and hopelessness, and it was just a very difficult situation. Now, that those were such young little second graders, I want to tell you that being shot with a handgun is not pleasant, but you have a way better chance of surviving than an AK automatic weapon. In an emergency room, your organs are just splattered with an AK. You have a better chance of being fixed. So even though that's not a good option, if we have to start somewhere, I believe it has to be the automatic weapons. There are actually fake news sites that say that Sandy Hook was made up. Fake news hasn't been addressed yet today, but we need to just keep educating people and telling them that ridiculous things like that are not true. And statistics, I think, show that there have been very few deterrents to crime with a gun, especially mass shootings. It just hasn't worked. So thank you again, you young people, for keeping my hope up. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Kemp. I'm a member and on the board of our Wisconsin Revolution. So just a little plug for us. Everyone can sign up. And, we share your values of getting rid of guns. And I get nervous when I talk in front of groups of people. I'm also a newly elected alderperson, so I will always do whatever I can to support the efforts that you guys are making. I have 2 kids at Harborside. We've had multiple threats, never a school closure. They swept it under the rug, really, and slapped kids on the wrist. The worst was an expulsion. So it's pretty scary. I have the same anxieties that you do every single day when send my kids to school. And just out in public, it's a constant thought in the back of my mind, like, what's gonna happen if somebody comes in here and does this? Where am I gonna go? Where can I hide? So it's a constant thing. So you have my support.
I want to thank you all for coming out to support this student-organized event. We hope that this has given some insight to the community regarding the concerns of our students and what we hope our elected officials plan to do about it. The purpose of this event was to inform the public and get the message across that no child should have to go to school in fear and that it is time for change to come about. We don't need your thoughts and prayers. We need change. We need progress.
Yeah.
This entire movement is created by, inspired by, and led by students of all ethnicities, religions, and sexualities across the country. It is apparent that we are sick and tired of waiting for someone else to take action to stop the epidemic of mass shootings and the lack of common sense gun reform.
Yeah.
That is why we walked out on March 14th. That is why we marched across the nation on March 24th. And that is why we're here today at this town hall on April 7th. To my fellow youngins, continue to be active in our democracy. Register to vote. There's a table out there. Stay updated with the news. Email, write, call, visit the offices of our representatives. Protest, fight for the betterment of our nation and your futures, as seen here today. We are not too young to have any valid opinions. We have the right to be concerned with issues that affect each and every one of us in this country. Through continued unity, we will save lives. Change starts with us, and we will not stop our advocacy until we see the change we demand.
Yeah.
A change that is necessary in order to save innocent lives across our nation. It is time to say, enough!
Yeah.
We must stand with all of those personally affected by gun violence. We must fight together to end the murdering of innocent lives. We must uphold the safety of all individuals, no matter who you are or wherever you are. And this movement started with all the youngsters, people like us. We must continue, and we must never back down until our voices are heard, loud and clear.
Yeah.
So I did hear you loud and clear. Well done. And I just want to thank these young women and young people that have put this together and are refusing to back down on this issue. You know, as I've been talking about this issue with a lot of adults, they've said that, you know, oh, well, these kids, they just are a little naive. They don't know that we're not ever going to be able to do something about this issue. And I really admire them for refusing to accept that as truth. Because that is absolutely untrue. We have seen it before, young people rising up and making incredible change and altering the course of this country and changing the culture of this country. It's going to be hard. And I just want to thank them not only for this, but I also want to encourage them to be persistent. And it's going to be, you know, a long road ahead. But if you're on a mission and you're relentless, I really believe that we'll be able to turn things around here. And it's all going to take all of us to do that. So I hope that when you go home from here, you start engaging your friends and neighbors and family in doing something about this issue and going to the polls and reminding them that we are the government.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all for attending today. I just want to say a couple quick words really quick. Thank you to you all for coming, and thank you to our sponsors and our co-sponsors, our speakers and Kathy. We appreciate it. The power that's in this room is really overwhelming to know that our youth really does have an impact. So we are going to continue, and we know we're going to tell our friends to continue and tell your children to continue, because we do have a chance to make real change. And so I'm just so happy that I got to do this. Thank you so much.